Thanks for listening to He Says, She Says, God Says, a podcast about marriages where God is at the centre. I'm Emily Campbell, and this is my husband, Ben Campbell.
Good morning, afternoon, whatever time you're listening.
Oh yes, it's very early on a Sunday morning for us, and we're very organised this morning. How's it going, Ben?
Good.
Now, I know that you are just bursting to get this episode edited, produced, and on the air, and sharing it with everyone out there. Now, why are you so keen?
So, in this episode, we interview Max and Tash. There's a couple of reasons why I want to get this episode out. Firstly, they're our first guests to be interviewed.
Indeed.
So last week,
didn't they do a great job?
They did do a great job. So last week we had Danny and Mandy, who were our first hosts, and Max and Tash have produced a really open, honest, raw account of their first years of marriage. And that's what this episode is all about. It's called What on Earth Have We Done? And it's about the first year or two of marriage where maybe with rose-coloured glasses, and then realise that there are some things that you didn't expect when you turned up on your wedding day. So that's what this episode is about. For a lot of people, there are no major dramas in the first couple of years, but for many others that there is. And Max and Tash really do open up and tell us that it's actually okay to talk about it, and it's okay to seek some help through those years if you need them. And it's really an episode about the importance of communication.
Oh, absolutely. And expectation.
Correct.
And maybe because you sort of go into a marriage and you may have these expectations of the other person that you haven't even fully communicated yet to that person. So they don't even know what your expectations are. You just assume they know them, and then they're letting you down all over the place, and it's really you.
Because you haven't communicated
Yeah.
them.
So it's about being honest with each other with kindness.
And I think the other part too is that it ties really nicely into our first episode. So there are a number of things that they talk about.
Yeah.
That if you go back and listen to episode 2, not first episode actually, episode 2, where we unpack Ephesians 5, you'll get a real understanding of what Max and Tash talk about and how the scriptures are really clear in how we can overcome some of these challenges.
Absolutely.
Max shared with us a scripture which I'll read out to you now, and we'll put this in the show notes. He talked about Romans 5 and verse 3 and 4. And it says here, and I'll read from the Amplified, it says, "Moreover, let us be full of joy now. Let us exult and triumph in our troubles and rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that pressure and affliction and hardship produce patient and unswerving endurance. And endurance, or fortitude, develops maturity of character, approved faith and tried integrity. And character of this sort produces the habit of joyful and confident hope of eternal salvation." So, thinking back to our first year or two,
yes.
I mean, that was a long time ago now.
Oh, back when the world was flat.
And dinosaurs ruled the earth. I mean, for Max and Tash, it's much sooner, so their memory is probably a lot stronger.
Yeah.
But what do you recall from our first, 1 or 2 years of marriage 28 years ago?
I think largely we were having a lot of fun, but I think that maybe the management of finances was one of our key issues, or should I say the mismanagement. Of finances and the going to the bank account and why do we not have money to buy groceries or those sorts of things. So that was a hard discussion and took quite a bit to iron out. But we got there. We've got a good strategy on how we move forward with that.
Mm-hmm. That strategy is you do the finances and I'm not involved?
Absolutely. We discuss big issues, but I think for quite a while there you were issued your allowance, and if you went near our money, I don't even think you had access to it.
So we might spend some more time in another episode. I think we've got another episode coming up on money, so we'll spend some time talking about that. What else do you remember from the first year or two? I know there were a bunch of logistical challenges that got us grumpy from time to time around family events and other things. I don't really remember much else.
Nothing really stands out.
I'm sure there was lots. I remember telling somebody once, years after we got married, that our first year was the hardest, but I don't actually remember why it was so hard.
I think it's just you've got two individuals coming together
Yeah.
and once again, full of expectation that hasn't been communicated at all, and you're just trying to find your way. So that means I think sometimes the first year is hard because you're working out how to communicate with that person.
Well, everything's new too, right?
Yeah.
So not only do you have a whole bunch of things that you need to talk about, you've also got a whole bunch of things to work out. Finance to work out, logistics to work out, schedules to work out, how you do stuff around home, who's doing what things, who's doing the dishes this week.
If at all.
Those sorts of things. And you've just got to work your way through all of those things. And you don't do that without good communication.
Well, that's right. And I think initially you could potentially just let it get to a stage where it's at boiling point rather than talking about it civilly to start with. I do remember one situation. And there's just no point getting absolutely aggro because the other person may not even know. Remember that time I took off and we had someone staying over with us and I rang Mum.
We had a regular person staying with us every couple of months or something, wasn't it?
Every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'd taken off. I'd phoned Mum from a phone box. She came and picked me up. She took me home and gave me a cup of coffee and listened.
So what were you cranky about?
I actually can't remember.
Okay.
It was probably to do with maybe I didn't feel heard at that point or I was running around too much. You were distracted with the other person and I was working hard we were working full time and I was studying and then I was cooking and And
you had somebody in your house.
Yeah, and so I think that I'd called Mum, downloaded all my woes. She didn't take a side. She goes, okay, get in the car. And I'm like, what, you taking me back? And she's like, get in the car. And I'm like, oh. And so she dropped me home and said, yep.
She didn't take a side?
She didn't take a side.
She's such a legend.
Yeah. She just nodded and didn't give an opinion. What she did is she listened and I'm sure she was peaking with worry and then dropped me off and probably thought, oh my goodness, and probably had heaps of prayer about it and sent me on my way. She goes, nope, back you go. And I couldn't believe it. And because in my head it was all over.
So with the expectation that you have to sort it out yourself.
Yeah, and that she wasn't going to sort it for me, that I had to walk back in and sort it. And I walked back in the door and you guys are like, oh, where have you come from? And you didn't even notice that I had gone.
So you'd left in a huff to prove a point or whatever.
Yes,
and
be dramatic.
Be dramatic, and we didn't even know you'd gone.
Which just goes to show in general, if you've got a problem with a person, just, maybe cool your heels, be calm, but then just have a discussion. And that's biblical too.
Of course it is. Yeah. All right, so we're going to get into Max and Tash's episode next. What do we want people to do? We want them to obviously listen to the other episodes. We're on Facebook and Instagram, so if you're keen to connect and find out about new episodes, then look up He Says, She Says, God Says there. We have a website, www.hesaysshesaysgodsays.com. We also have an email list you can sign up for on that website. And make sure you subscribe on your favourite podcast app. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. You can just open your podcast app, your Apple one or your Spotify one or whatever it is that you use.
Podbean, and go for it.
And sign her up. So, on to Max and Tash.
Max and Tash.
Max and Tash.
Max and Tash.
Max and Tash. Max and Tash, welcome to He Says, She Says, God Says.
Thank you, Ben.
G'day, Benny.
Good to be here.
You're our first guests.
Wow. We must be important.
You are important. You got some great stories to tell.
Yeah, sure do.
Max has got his head in his hands. He's going, oh, man. Boy, have we got some stories.
Yeah, how long do you have?
So this episode's about our first years in marriage, because often as couples we go into a marriage thinking it's all going to be rainbows and unicorns and amazing, and it usually is, but sometimes it's pretty challenging as well. And there are a lot of things that we don't expect or haven't thought about, or challenges that we have. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get into that, how did you guys hook up?
Tash came... Where'd you come? We came from Canberra. Tash moved over when she was 16. And
love at first sight from Max's point of view.
Yeah, from Tash's point of view. So, I remember seeing her at the Vogue. I think it was a Youngies breakup. Yeah. And I was walking down the aisle, Well, I was walking down the aisle and I looked across the other side, and then I saw Tash and thought,
what do you think, Max?
I thought she's pretty gorgeous. So, and then was looking forward to meeting her for about 3 months because I was at Woodcroft, she was at Elizabeth, and then we ran into each other at a camp. And then, I just obviously played it really cool. And
it's funny because that night at the Vogue, that was a Youngies breakup, and I was the new girl from, I was fresh meat, had kind of come over from Canberra, and all the girls came up to me and they said, "Oh, is there any boys that you like?"
You only just got here.
Yeah, I know, but that's what you think about when you're 16.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "Oh, you can go for any guy, but whatever you do, stay away from Max Wakefield." Because he's a player. That's what I got told. Anyway, I ended up falling in love with Max Wakefield. So, yeah.
I don't know about that rumour, but it was, it was just good. Because, I think it was the first time I wanted to do something like the right way, know? Like I just stopped drinking. I stopped being naughty, you know what I mean? And I just was like actually starting to enjoy the Lord.
Yeah.
Starting to read the Bible like I never did that before. And I wasn't even thinking about a girl. And I feel like sometimes the Lord, like when you just look into Him, like things just happen, you know? And it just happened. Like I didn't even know Tash really existed until I saw her at the Vogue. And then it just happened. But I was just enjoying like spending time with the Lord. So I probably was an idiot, and the girls probably had and the guys and parents, like me and a few of the guys we were stupid. So, that probably, that opinion was probably fair.
Yeah, there was a lot of, actually a lot of older people warned my parents.
Did they?
Yes. And I don't know, I tend to like to make my own decisions, and from what I knew from Max, I wasn't gonna take on board these stories that I had heard when they hadn't been my experiences. So from the beginning, Max was really respectful of me, and he was really looking to the Lord and loved the Lord, and I really saw that in him. So,
and I loved it because you were like, once we sort of realised we liked each other, you were in Elizabeth and I was at Woodcroft, and we couldn't see each other heaps. So we were just talking.
So for those that are listening that aren't here in Adelaide, that's like one end of the city to the other.
Sorry, Penny. Paint the picture a bit better. But yeah, because she was so far away, it was over an hour away sort of thing. And, we were working, and, I think I had my P's.
Yeah, you had your P's, yep.
But, we'd only see each other probably on Sundays, and sometimes we wouldn't see each other every Sunday. So it was just talking on the phone. And it was just so nice having a friendship. Like before anything else, it's like nothing, like, and we couldn't
get a visual,
so whatever that was. So like we couldn't
hold hands.
Yeah, like nothing like that. And we didn't for 9 months, but we just built such a good friendship.
Yeah.
And then by the time we were able to, go out, because we were sort of a bit older and a bit more mature.
And I reckon that foundation of friendship has stayed with us even till today. Through everything that we've been through, we've still always remained great friends. And I reckon it's because we invested so much time at the beginning in just building that really good foundation.
Yeah. I remember our first week of conversations, it was like, hearing about your testimony and that. And for me, when I was that age, that was so weird. You know what I mean? Like actually wanting to chat to a girl about her testimony. Like I was not thinking like that 6 months before that.
Wow.
So that's how much like the Lord sort of changed my mindset. Like He really changed me. And it was just for me personally, it was just a thought of like, I want to do the right thing now. And that little thought, God just changed me, man, like completely. And to the point where like, that's how I was thinking, about Tash. It was just like, I just wanted to hear her testimony, like know about her family, like, And then, you know, we were talking about scriptures all the time, and it was just awesome.
Yeah.
So good.
So how long ago was that?
That was a long time ago.
Let's do the maths. Well, we got married in 2008, so it would have been 2000 and... When did I move here? 2006?
Yeah, I think it was
2005.
Yeah. Well, I'm 29 now, and we went out when I was
17.
just 17, you were 16 and a half. So it was a long time ago.
Yeah. So 2008, so you've been married 11 years-ish?
No, we've been married coming up to 10.
10 years.
Sorry, did we get married in 2010? Oh my goodness, how bad's this?
Yeah, we did. It just blurs into one, doesn't it?
It's all one. So, sorry. Okay, so that's right. So we got together in 2007.
Yeah.
Sorry. And then we got married in 2010. Yes.
Because we were going out for like 3.5 years. We got married. You were 19, I was 20.
Yeah. So that's 12 years.
What, marriage?
No, 12 years all up.
Oh,
You just said when was that?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Okay, I think it's 12 years. Yeah, it must be. 12 years.
Anyway, I just say it's been a while. It's been a while.
It's been
a while. So tell me about the first couple of years.
Of marriage? Do you want to go first?
Yeah.
I'll let her go, then I'll play my case.
Actually, before we do that, so when you were leading up to your wedding day, what were your expectations about what marriage was going to be like?
Okay, so I think the hard thing is when you fall in love with someone at a young age, and I can only speak about our situation because we were so young, but I can speak for myself, I was pretty immature. So when you think about love, I wasn't thinking about love being something that you do for someone else. So you give to them and you love them the way they want to be loved. It's kind of, for me, it was, I guess, a bit more selfish. So I went into it trying to figure out what I could get out of it, I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah, to be completely honest. And that was just a very naive, I guess, immature way of being in a relationship. So that kind of looked like wanting things my way. Most of the time not really respecting Max as his own person, respecting Max and his own opinions. So very, I guess, close-minded and just wanting to, be right and get my own way, to be honest. But I'm just being honest. I mean, I loved Max, but I didn't understand what love was. I didn't understand what a relationship was, and I didn't really respect him as a man of God, and that God had made him the way he is, and that I should love him that way. I suppose you can sometimes try and change someone into what you think is best. And that's probably what I went into it sort of thinking. Especially
when you move out, because I hadn't lived out of home by myself. Tash hadn't. We both lived with our folks. Yeah. And obviously in the Lord, we do things, the way the Bible says it about, like waiting for marriage with certain things and like, it's just a massive jump. You go from living at home with your folks, like mum's cooking your dinner.
Fundamentally, really no responsibility to having all responsibility.
Yes.
100%. Like all I worried about was like my car, working, and then, go see Tasha at her house and her parents would look after us. You know what I mean? Like it was so easy. And then all of a sudden you're married and it felt right that we were married, but it was just like we were so young. And everything changed.
It was quite scary, actually.
It was terrifying.
I think if we can just jump to when we first got married, it hit us when the wedding was over and it was just me and Max, and we were kind of like, we didn't communicate this with each other, but individually we were both terrified. All the hype, you have so much your focus is this wedding, this big wedding day, this big party you're going to throw, and it's super exciting. And then sometimes you go into it not prepared.
For the rest of your life.
Marriage. Yeah, exactly. And it hit us pretty hard from day one, really. Yeah.
Because I've spoken to some people and they've spoken about how fantastic the first year of marriage is, You're taking them on face value, so you think they're telling the truth and they, being genuine and stuff. And we had some great times, like, being first married. It wasn't all doom and gloom. It was just, there was just a lot of challenges that we, I guess, being young, very immature, and like, you're also working yourself out, like when you're 20. And I think you start to really work yourself out when you start getting responsibility, like you said, Benny, like, you get this responsibility, and you're just like, how am I going to deal with this? Like, how am I going to cope with life? You know, and it's like, I think we're going to talk about Sonny later. And that's the next thing, is like when you have a kid and you're like, how am I going to deal with this? Like, how's my personality going to test against no sleep? You know, and when you get married, it's just, how's my personality going to go rocking up home every day? I'm tired, and you know, Tasha's there. You know, you might have had a fight or something, and how are you gonna resolve it? You know, and I think jumping to where we are now, where we have been, the biggest thing, probably one of the biggest things I've learnt personally is you're always going to have disagreements. You're always going to have dramas. You're always going to have things that happen that upset you. Sometimes you're upset together against something else. Sometimes you're upset at each other. But and now we've got Sonny. The biggest thing we've spoken about it is showing Sonny how to resolve things that don't go perfectly. You know, life does not go perfect. Things happen, and it's about working out how to fix it. And I think you learn that with maturity. And when you're 20 and 19, like Tash and I were, we really didn't understand that. So things that could be resolved pretty quickly through communication that you learn when you're older take so long to work out, because you don't know how to communicate. You know, you can't communicate, and then you're miscommunicating, and then things get bigger and they snowball. And I think that was probably the biggest thing in the first year that we just probably struggled to cope
communication.
with. It was communication. Yeah.
So looking back on that period of time now, if you had your time over again, what would you do differently?
The answer is the scriptures. I think back now, and I didn't really understand what God required of me. I heard someone say the other day that if you don't go into marriage saying your vows on your wedding day absolutely terrified, then you don't really understand marriage.
You don't understand the importance of the vows.
Absolutely. And I think I didn't understand that at the time, because those vows and those promises are huge. And you know, you might be in a situation where your partner is maybe not upholding those vows in certain, you know, circumstances, but it always comes back to what God requires of you to do in a marriage. And if I could go back in time, I would stop focusing on what I felt Max wasn't doing, and I would focus on what the Lord requires of me and how I need to love Max. And I didn't do that.
And is that because you didn't understand that at that point?
I think so. I think I didn't really get it. I don't think I had, I think I didn't have a great understanding of the Bible, and maybe I didn't seek out those answers. And I think it's pretty easy to just stay frustrated at somebody and be angry at somebody when you feel they're not doing their part, and focus on that. I think naturally as humans, that's what we do.
Of course.
Yeah. But, you know, I always think about Christ, and God always refers to us as the bride, and by all means, he sent his own son and sacrificed his son for us, and we have rejected him and we sin every day, but still he loves us. And so if Jesus Christ can do that as us as his bride, how much more should I love my husband in his shortcomings? So understanding that, and that's kind of actually really, it still makes things really difficult. It doesn't mean that when your partner's, you know, not loving you the way that you feel they should be, it doesn't make that easy, but it means that if you can change your focus from that to focusing on the Lord and what God requires of you, that you'll get peace through that, because you know that you're actually right in front of the Lord. That would be my advice to myself.
We unpacked those scriptures a bit in episode 2 of this podcast, so which is really powerful in Ephesians 5. You know, it talks very strongly about those principles. What about you, Max?
It's really hard, like looking back at it, you know, in hindsight, to think what I would do. I guess I would handle it the way I am now, because marriage is great, but we've gone through nearly 10 years, so we've learned a lot of lessons, you know, and I think it's really hard. Yeah, it's really hard to know what I would do, but I guess if I was in my position now, I'd just be myself now. Yeah. And I feel like it would be good. Yeah.
Do you think, though, probably the biggest thing has been communication, learning how to communicate, how you're feeling?
But I think, like, that communication has been learned over 9 years of marriage through experience. You know, like, you know, the Bible talks about experience, you know, works character and stuff like that. And it just, And that's what I was saying before, is sometimes the, experiences happen and sometimes they're bad and they're difficult, but you work through them and, it's like the Lord says he tries us like gold in the fire. The fire's hot. It burns. It's not pleasant, but that's how he refines us. And like Tash and I and you, Benny, like in 10 years, we'll be completely different again.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll be refined again. But I think it's funny looking at it in hindsight. I saw what didn't work in marriage, in the first couple of years, even few years were challenging, to now I see what does work in marriage and gives us a happy marriage. And I've learnt that along the way, sometimes the hard way, but yeah, and communication is definitely one of them.
So obviously you were both big communicators when you were dating. You talked about being on the phone a lot. Why did that change when you got married, do you think?
When you first, I guess, meet somebody, everything's sort of really fresh and exciting and you want to know everything about that person. When you get married, you're with that person 24/7. And so along with the good comes the bad. So you're more aware of their faults, the things that annoy you. And so that can begin to kind of build up that frustration, that annoyance, even simple things like, someone not hanging out their towel after they have a shower properly, all those sorts of things that don't seem like a really big deal, but they build up.
And things you just can't talk about beforehand because who's
exactly
going to talk about stuff like that before you get married?
100%.
Exactly. And it's usually, the fights and arguments you have are usually over those sorts of things, aren't they?
They're so stupid.
Yeah.
And that's the miscommunication.
Yeah.
You can't communicate. It looks like it's a bigger deal than what it is, but it's just something stupid because you might be tired or something,
So I guess, communication, what you're communicating about does change. And so it's maybe not as fun and exciting and positive because you've got other issues now to deal with.
I think you made a good point about faults, because it's very easy, like when you're not living with someone, to show them what you want to show them. When you're chatting to someone on the phone, it's very easy to just be happy and show the positive side. And sometimes when you get home from work and someone's there and, you've had a bad week, it's building up and it's harder to cover the faults, and eventually they'll come out, especially if you're married with someone all the time, like your faults will come out. Yeah. You'll see them. And then maybe the other person's like, whoa, I didn't, Tash might be like, I didn't think.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, where did that come from?
Haven't seen that turn up before.
Yeah, exactly, but I've, it's something that I might have always had, whatever the issue is, I might have always had that. And then all of a sudden you're dealing with it all the time, and I think going back to what we said before, that's about it's so funny looking back at it in hindsight, because now I understand Tash. When she's having a bad day, I feel like I can understand why, and I can understand how to best deal with it.
Yeah.
In my experiences,
Yeah.
Whereas before I might have misread it and gone, why is she so upset? And then I get upset at her. You learn how to deal with each other, and that's, I guess, the experience where the communication comes in is because it's experience. You've experienced something, so you understand it better, so you know how to deal with it better. When you first get married, you haven't experienced it, you got no idea, and you don't even understand how to deal with things yourself.
Yeah.
So
it's that kind of process of the two flesh becoming one.
Yeah.
You're two flesh before you get married, so you're still an individual. I feel like you still have your sense of, independence, and you're not 100% committed. When you get married, you become that one flesh. And so you both have to figure out what that looks like. And that can be really quite challenging, because a lot of the times you have to put down your pride and you do need to negotiate. And so things that you were doing prior to being married, you need to let go of. And that's really hard. It's not easy, and it's frustrating and very easy to build up resentment to that partner.
The thing I love about the one flesh concept is that when one is down and the other lifts up, right, that's the power of the one flesh, right, being together. And I think that's, to me, it's just an amazing concept. And when you finally work that out in your relationship, that's actually not only part of your responsibility, but part of the power of the relationship. And that's how it becomes a much stronger thing than just the two of you individually.
Absolutely. Marriage, the Lord's intended marriage to be like a wonderful thing.
It is. It's
incredible.
amazing.
Yeah. When you're doing it right, when you're not doing it right, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, it is.
It actually is, yeah.
Got to be honest.
So I'm sure there'll be listeners who are about to be married, thinking about being married.
Don't want to scare them. Breaking up the engagement after this podcast.
Nah.
That's not the intention.
No, we don't want that.
What would you tell your dating selves? So if you could jump in your DeLorean and go back to 2007, Tash, what would you say? So what would you say to Tasha back then?
For me, it comes down to just the answer to me is actually really simple, and I feel like it covers most things, but it's just to love the Lord, to serve the Lord. And what do we do by serving the Lord is to serve others, and just keeping that at the heart of everything you do. Because if you do that, your marriage will be blessed, because you'll be doing what the Lord, and when I say your marriage will be blessed, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have issues, because they arise. But if that's your heart, then ultimately the Lord is going to bless whatever happens. And I would also really tell myself to respect Max as an individual, as someone that's different to me, and be open to what I can learn from him about how he does things differently, because he's taught me a lot, and that's made me a better person. And if I just did things my own way all the time, I'd still be that same old person. And I'm super thankful that, Max has changed me for the better, because I've allowed him to teach me a lot.
Maxie?
Same question. I would say to my young dating self that it's the right decision, and it will be the best decision you made. That's what I'd say. Fully knowing, the hurdles that we've had.
But I'm sure you thought it was the right decision at the time.
100%, yeah. I mean, at the time you're thinking, I'm very young, and so is Natasha, but you're also thinking like, I was chatting to a few people about this recently, to a guy who got married pretty young as well. He actually isn't even a Christian, but we were just talking about marriage. And he said, like, once I found my wife, I saw her when I was 16, and then I didn't see her for a year, and then I ran into her. And that since that night, they've been when they ran into each other, they've been together ever since. They got 3 kids. And like talking to him, I could see he just loves her, and it's the best decision he's made. And I sort of feel the same thing. Like, once you find someone that you're attracted to, you find special, it's amazing to find that at a young age. Some people are looking for that, and they're like a lot older than what we were. So I feel it was 100%. It's 100% the right thing to do. And I'd just say to myself, and anyone else that might be young getting married as well, is look to the Lord. And I think this is the point of this podcast, Ben. Like, and I love what you're doing. And Tash and I are just trying to be honest. Is like, it's just not going to be perfect. Like, and if you are going through a tough time with something, like, it's really okay to talk about it. Because a lot of the time I didn't talk about stuff because I was like, oh, everyone else seems so happy.
Must just be me.
It must just be me, But it's not. Like, and that's what Tash and I are trying to, what we've thought about it, talking to you about the podcast, is we just want people to know, like, marriage is amazing, but it's okay if you're having trouble, and it's okay to talk about it. Like, whether that's marriage or something.
Did you guys talk to anybody, when you're having some challenges in the first year or so?
Well, I mean, we did, but
we didn't really, did we?
Yeah,
we sought sort of a bit of help, but didn't continue on with it. And I definitely think there's a place for that. 100%. I think if we had maybe some mentors or someone around us, some maybe possibly older people around us to sort of help us navigate our way through those first few years, that would have been incredibly important or incredibly helpful for us. And I don't think we sought that. I think we kind of held our issues pretty close.
Yeah, we bothered it because you don't want to feel.
Part of it's a bit embarrassing as well.
I was going to say the word embarrassing.
Of course.
And again, that's why this podcast is so good, because you're letting other people know that people have gone through the same things, the same challenges, and we're not all perfect. We're all learning. If we were perfect, we wouldn't get tried through the fire.
Guys, I absolutely love your openness about the conversation we've had. I'm sure it's not an easy thing to say and to share, but I think it's really, really invaluable. And thanks so much for sharing.
Cheers, Benny.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We're all just making it up as we go along.
Until we make it, man.
And I was not a great communicator either.
He just didn't talk about stuff.
Yeah.
And I came from a family where there was a lot of talking. So I probably overshared. Probably freaked him out.
I'd rather you talk than me.
So you were just quite happy with me constantly talking.
I think it's a guy thing though, that's generalising, but I think it's pretty common. I'm the same. I'm open book, like ask me anything. And like
when you come home, you're just like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I lost my train of thought. Sorry, Benny.
I'm good as you can edit this stuff out. I think you answered that question anyway, didn't you?
I answered it, and then I got to the end, and I was like, "Why am I still talking?
Yeah,
Shut up!"
Yeah.
I have such a noisy nose.
You really do.
It's so annoying. It's so much.
It has a voice of its own.
It's so much effort in the post-production to get rid of it. It's so annoying.
Well, that's one of the... Do you know that when we went out, I was actually so relieved that you used your hanky heaps because I was a person that blew my nose a lot and wheezed and coughed and spluttered, and you blew your nose and it made me feel as if I was a tiny little bit normal.
That didn't attract you to me, did it?
No! It was
Oh, there's
just...
a guy who blows his nose. He's hot.
He's hot. He blows his nose. No, it was just a benefit.
Oh, God said.